Hello, everyone. Hello. Yeah, a round of applause would be fine. I know that was probably my friends just being sympathetic or something. Lovely to be here in Namur. Is that right? Yeah, ish. Okay, sorry. Probably like many of you in this room, we all make stuff. We all design stuff. Probably like many of you, my mum has no idea what I do for a living. So, to that aim, I said, Mum, don't worry, I'm a visual person. What I'll do, I'll draw you a sketch and it will all become clear. So I drew her this. I said, Mum, you see what it is, right? No, listen to me. I said, it's design. And design is like this shape, and technology is this shape, and art is this, and where it all comes together and coalesces, it makes this shape, and that's kind of what I do. And she looked at me and said, I told my hairdresser you invented Google Maps. And I said, yeah, same thing. So I'm going to talk about this thing which I can't really describe properly. I'm a designer, wannabe artist. I'd love to show you you know when designers show you where they work, have you noticed it's always white and it's always slick and they don't have anything out of place and there's everything is just so. This is where I work and I'd love to say it's my studio. It's the back room in our house, sorry. And that's where I make my stuff. I mostly work alone. If you've ever worked with me, you'll know why. And this is actually from a few years ago, and there's even more stuff now, and there's other machines that are there, and all kinds of stuff. I realise I haven't plugged any power in, so if anyone's got any power back there, that would be cool. And yeah, we've just gone off, there we go. So this is where I work. It's not like a typical design studio, it's just a thing. And I realize that actually what I do for a living, I think I'm actually just, like Stephanie said this morning, I am an anorak, I'm a geek, I collect things. And I've always collected things. And before I got into design, I collected breakbeats and I compiled for a record company in London. I went into vinyl record shops. Do you remember vinyl? Yeah. And it's come back now, so everyone knows it. Yeah, we got vinyl now, we're cool. So I used to find obscure breakbeats and find these things, and then we'd compile. This was all highly illegal, by the way. And then DJs would use these breakbeats. And I think, you know what, now I do exactly the same, but I just do it in a digital way. I find things that already exist and try and combine them in ways that hopefully are a little bit interesting. And as you can tell, I'm an old git. I'm 52 years old. Oh, you don't look it? No, honestly. And this was my first computer. This was a Sinclair ZX81, and I got this given to me for Christmas in 1981. Most of you are like, what? Did they even exist back then? Yeah, they did. And this had 1K of RAM. You can't even make a GIF in 1K. And I love this thing because it actually, you plugged it into your TV. There was no GUI or anything like that. There was just a cursor. And the cursor just looked at you, and it was blinks. And it said, what are you looking at? So, and you had to type things in to make it do stuff, and I like that. But more than anything, it was a black box that allowed me to make things with. And to me, that's what computers are. They're just these boxes, and we can pour our imagination in as a collective group, and we can make stuff. I also had a record contract during the rave scene in Manchester. Yes, people, this was me. So there are 400 people that bought this record. Maybe one of you is in the audience. It's statistically not very likely. But and this was I formed Vitamin Beat. Again, it was just me. And I played Cream in Liverpool, which is a famous club. And my brother, who was massively into drugs, I rang him up and said, look, I'm going to be on stage, but I don't want to be on stage on my own. Could you jump on stage with me, eat out your brains, and then just pretend to play keyboards? And he was like, hell yeah. So, and then... He did this PA set with me, and then I didn't see him the rest of the night because I don't know where he was, but yeah, he was flying somewhere. So that's kind of my background, and so the analog side for me has always been a big thing. This was an experiment I did. I got asked to do a design talk in Chicago many years ago, and they said, could you do something a little bit different for us in your talk? And I looked around in my office, and there was a ball of Play-Doh on a shelf. And I said, yeah, I'll interface Play-Doh with a computer. And they went, wow, that sounds cool. And I got off the phone and was like, oh, right. Now I've got to make something. So I told them I was going to do it. So I think we've got a bit of sound on this. Let me just go back. Got a little bit of sound? No? Hello? Oh, you can hear it a little bit. So this is Play-Doh controlling the speed of that film in real time. The more Play-Doh is on the screen, the faster the film goes. The less Play-Doh is, I need more friends. So this was like an experiment, and the web is this amazing, beautiful thing where you put this stuff out there, and you just do not know who is going to see it. And because of this project, the agency I was with at the time, we got a call from the BBC, and they rang us up and said, we don't want that, but we want the thinking behind it. And we ended up working for the BBC for like 10 years. So this stupid... Anyway, I showed it in Chicago at this massive design conference. The How Design Conference is like the Walmart of design conferences. Faceless, soulless horribleness, right? But there's like 10,000 people there. But I did this talk at this conference, and I showed this thing, and a guy stood up, and he was an American in very high-waisted chinos, I remember it. And he stood up and he said, it's clever and all, but what's the point? And I went, there is no point. So his mind just blew up. So now, I'm not getting any sound anyway. Who cares? The sound was rubbish. I can kind of... There we go. Thank you. All adds to the atmos, doesn't it? You know. So now I do little experiments. And these, I might work out how to map lines around a sphere. I might drive a robot around the kitchen. I might do something with the Mona Lisa. I don't know. And I get all these things, and then I store them in my kind of digital cupboard in the hope that maybe one of these useless things might be used on a piece of work or might inspire a piece of work. And that's kind of, and it's how you glue these things together that is the important bit. But this idea of the analog in the digital, I'm always fascinated with. I think there's a space in between digital and analog things. And that space in the middle is kind of the stuff that I'm interested in. I love digital tech, but I also love buttons. I made this remote. Again, friends. So imbue the things you make with punctuation. I love this idea of a comma, semicolon, full stop. I can talk for an hour on the beauty of a semicolon, but I won't. These are all different timing mechanisms, and we need to think about these things when we design things, I think. Like, for instance, I recently got back into vinyl, and the reason I like vinyl, and I also use Spotify a lot as well, but the thing I love about it, and I think Dominic mentioned this earlier about anticipation. It's about when you drop that needle on the record, and before the music starts, there's like a few seconds of static, and then the music starts. And that bit between dropping the needle and the music is really important, I feel, to us as human beings, as people. It's incalculable. You don't really know why it matters, but it kind of does. And now we have that thing has gone unless you have vinyl. So I like that kind of anticipation. I also like leafing through things to find stuff visually. But I also love, I'm not someone who wears rose-tinted spectacles and thinks, oh, it was so much better in the past, because I was there, and it was crap. Cassettes, they were ace. No, they were rubbish. They were terrible. Vinyl, takes up rooms takes up space. So I love the digital. I can find any piece of music. I found more music and discovered more music on Spotify than when I used to hang around record shops when I was younger. And that is just true. For me, anyway. I didn't bump into weird people as much, but, it's... So I decided, could I combine these things, my love of analog and vinyl, but the beauty of digital, where it gives you all this music with, just in one click. So I created this thing. So this is all open source. It's on GitHub. You can make this yourself. I once made an electronic product and I nearly died. It's very stressful, so I'm not doing that again. But I decided to open source it. And I made this thing called Plastic Player. And again, about found things. These are 35mm slides that I had in a cupboard, in a box, waiting to be used. And this is what I did with it. So we got sound on this. Thanks. People who hate Coltrane and go, thank God that's over. So you get the idea. You can, just slot an album in, it plays. It's connected to a Raspberry Pi that's connected to my hi-fi. This is all real. It's not fake. You can go to the next track. There's a little display. As I said, this is all open source, and you can download how to build this thing and 3D print it. The 3D printing is a boring box. It's not like Grant's Bear, unfortunately. Sorry about that. It doesn't move. But I recently, so you put this stuff out there, and you think, is anyone actually going to make this? And last week I had an email from someone who said they'd actually gone to the trouble of actually making it, and they said in the email, it's a truly magical experience. And for me, that was enough for me to make this thing. But I also learned a lot from myself. But for me, it tries to combine the beauty of choosing an album, putting it on, combined with all the advantages that digital give us. And I think we should learn to explore that space a lot more. It's not one or the other. It's a combination of those things. Combinations. So... I love Bela Kolarova. She was a Czech artist. But before I get onto her, this was my time with Google in London. And I do a lot of stuff with data. And anything can be data, as Stephanie showed, really. And these are like the scraps of... We just did pencil sketches for like 2 weeks. And I saved all my pencil shavings. And I realized that was essentially a timeline of my time with Google in pencil shavings. To me, that's a data visualization. Or maybe not, I don't know. So this is Bela Kolarova, and this is, again, this idea of found things. This is paint swatches, but you apply an aesthetic, you apply compositional understanding, you apply opinion, and it creates this, which I think is beautiful, and yet we walk past these kind of paint swatches that just become boring to us. We don't give it a second thought. I love this one. This is button fasteners that you have on clothes that you walk past in the supermarket every day, and I love the patterns that she made with these. Again, this idea of compositional thought applied to it. She goes in a shed and makes that. I just think it's kind of beautiful. So I'm trying to do this with the work that I do. This is the tweetable quote. I'll give you a sec. Right. So, so I strongly believe this, that data needs poetry. We need that in-between thing of the Excel spreadsheet. So I got asked by EE, or a big telecoms company, a few years ago. They were launching 4G services across the UK, and they said, we want to commission you to make some artwork for each of the 11 cities that were launching 4G, and we've teamed up with University College London, who are big brains, and they're going to collect all this data for 3 days worth of Twitter traffic. We're going to give it to you, and then you're going to make something, an artwork of some description. And I was like, wow, this could be a really cool job. So I started to look in my digital cupboard, and I remembered this. This is a Vogel spiral. So this is the kind of mathematics that make a sunflower head. So I don't spend time looking at design blogs or anything like that. I look more to nature and stuff and all kinds of things to be inspired by these things. So this is the map. I did this interface. Who remembers Flash? Yeah. Okay, should we just have a minute's silence? So my career was built on Flash. I would not be here today if it wasn't for Flash, and you might be thinking, Christ, why did that have to happen? But Vogel spiral, sunflower, and I thought this might be a good way to map out lots of data points. So I started to play with this thing, and they gave me, I think there was about 1,000 things in a CSV file for me to play with. So I started to play with shapes and forms and, just kicking things around, just not worrying too much where it was going. I started to form some things. Oh, there's maybe something interesting here. And then they collected 3 days worth of data for each city. And on the Monday, and I had to get these images ready for a Thursday because all the media was books and everything else. And they sent me the data, and the file was just a text file, just for London, was huge. I mean, it was like an hour's download or something. And I loaded it into my system that I'd built in processing, thinking I'd just load it all in and it would make a beautiful image. And it loaded it in and it just crashed and died. And they were ringing me up and they said, Brendan, how's it looking? And I'm like, yeah, I'm seeing it through tears at the minute. I was crying because none of it was working, So, and when you work on your own, you can't turn to someone and go, what do you help? I don't even own a dog. So there was no one to ask. But you go back to simplicity. You take a moment, and I realized that if I loaded in, instead of trying to load in a whole big CSV file, which I think had 6 million rows of data, I could load it in one row at a time. It would put a graphic on the screen, and it could do that for 1 billion things. It would just take a long time, but it would work. So in the end, this is London. There's a possible 4,320 points on this pattern. That's the number of minutes in 3 days, before you say anything. And so each moment, each tweet was categorized. We chose out different subjects, various things like Obama and things like that were happening in the news at the time. And you notice that in the middle, lots of people, so time expands from the center outwards. So the last day is on the outer edge, the middle day is in the middle, and it all spirals out from there. You'll see that after the first day, there's then this huge expanse of white. And that white is, what happened was Hurricane Sandy hit the eastern seaboard of the United States on that middle day. And white is everyone talking about New York and Hurricane Sandy. And then you see people go to sleep. You see how there's like a gap. And then the next day, no one cares about Hurricane Sandy. It's like, here's a picture of my cat, So it shows the transient nature of Twitter is, everyone does their emotive sympathy tweet. And then the next day, they just get on with their lives, And or maybe I'm just a cynical British person. But on the left is, you see that big red bit? That's the exact moment Obama visited New York, because that is people tweeting about Obama, and that's where it sort of, it became a mass. And these are some of the subjects. Some of it was really highbrow. Strictly Come Dancing, which is a big show in the States, in the UK, sorry. Some of that. And this wasn't for screen, by the way. This was a big print resolution thing, so it's not really made for on screen. There's Obama. Now, this is one of my favorite ones in the middle. I worked in Manchester for 12 years, and Manchester was one of the cities that we did. And Manchester United, who are a football team, they were playing football, I believe it's called, on the last day, and they scored 4 goals. And that's just from tweets. Just from tweets of people saying about Man United, and you see these red explosions. And I think Southampton were playing on that one, and yeah. So you can see that, I think, the correlation of like Bella Kolarova's work and putting patterns into, creating patterns from found things. And I think that's what inspiration for me is. You let it go fuzzy in your head, and then you apply your thinking to that fuzzy thing, and then you own that thing. It's not direct copying. If you don't let the inspiration go fuzzy, then you are actually just copying stuff. And then so that was a client piece. And then a lot of the times, my way to get client work is to put things out there in the world. The web is this amazing medium to do that. And to me, it's kind of like I put things out there like a kind of dangling a fishing hook. So I did this thing many years ago called the Happiness Machine. It bothered me that people were treating each other horribly on Twitter and on social media generally. So I thought, I'm going to make a machine that randomly connects to the internet and randomly finds people who are talking about happy things and gives you a receipt of happiness. And this is what I made. I hate the music, by the way, sorry. So there's a thing called the Happiness Machine, and I just did it for myself, and then it got written about on the internet. I think it was famous for like a day, which is a long time on the internet. And then it was in museums and galleries, and so people could actually play with it and stuff. This is my favorite photo. There's a friend of mine who has this very tiny gallery in Munich, and he said, do you want to do a little show here? So we'd set up the Happiness Machine, and we pinned up a lot of the stuff. And it taught me, do not prejudge who you think your audience is. And it's very easy to do, because when you make this stuff, you think, oh, the cool people are going to like this, right? And yet, these 3 lovely senior ladies were stood in the rain reading this, for all the stuff, in English, by the way, for 20 minutes. Just stood out there, and it taught me that they weren't looking at it thinking, it is an internet-connected happiness machine, yes? And they didn't give a shit. They were looking at the stories, because stories, people connect to things that are universal, and they connect to universal things universally. And that's what we should be concentrating on. Technology is infrastructure. Technology gives us new possibilities, but when you look at it, the things we're sending along those pipes are things that we've always connected with. And that's what's happening here. They're not bothered how it got there, by the way. So then what happens is, I dangle my little fish hook. And a few years later, by the way, it's not like the next week. A few years later, this company called Airbnb get in touch, and or an agency who's working with Airbnb. Now, you've got to watch yourself with agencies. This is my little tip. Because they will, if you make stuff like this, they will try and get stuff for free, which makes me feel physically ill. So, because they're getting paid, by the way, right? Remember that. So they contacted me and said, oh, we love your happiness machine, and we're doing this thing at the Sundance Film Festival. Airbnb take over a house, and it's all about community, and we'd love to have your happiness machine as part of that, basically for free. And I said, look, could do that, or I could come back with a proposal to ramp it up to the next level. And they were really interested in that, and then we talked, and we came up with a budget, and so we then agreed, said, let's make 12 of them and allow people to text message in and tell stories about people they've met in their neighborhood or anything they want it to be, but it's all via text message. And these stories would be shared in this house at the Sundance Film Festival. And then I realized, I'd done my quote, and then I realized that each case took 8 hours to print on my 3D printer, the same one that Grant uses. So yeah, next time I need to think about budgeting a bit better. But so I printed 12 of these, did all the electronics. I used a thing called Electric Imp, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, which is great, and it connects to Wi-Fi. It's similar to an Arduino, but it's specifically for IoT, Internet of Things type stuff. So I made these things, worked out how to do the SMS using Trello, I think it is, or something like that. It's dead easy. I got my paintbrush. This was, I arrived, and that's the thing, right? I'm a big movie fan, and I thought, Sundance Film Festival, I'm going. Sun, dancing, what's not to like? Films, right? You get there, you realize it's actually in January in a place just out Salt Lake City that's a ski resort, and it's snow everywhere, and it's really cold. So I get there, and I meet the agency in this house on that second level, and they're all like very American, optimistic, and they're all, makes me sick, So they're all like, hey, Brendan, how are you enjoying Park City? I says, it's chuffing freezing. That was my first words out my mouth were moaning. And then no, it's great, yeah. So anyway, we set this thing up, and this is what happened after a week, during the week. This is Christian from Airbnb. He's really cool. Notice the length of his pants. But no, he's the most lovely guy. And he was very, very happy. And we had this forest of stories. And let me tell you now, these stories were not just go get a coffee from this place. They were like, when I text message, don't know about you, I'm like, if 2 words is an essay for me. So these people were like really sharing deep stories. And it was amazing to me. And again, because I was prejudged it, I thought it's all going to be quite short, and it was absolutely not. So this is really just a lesson on put your stuff out there, put your ideas out there, and you can see some of the length of these things is nuts. And people wrote them and shared them, and I think you could only get the text number in the house, and I think we had 5,000 stories in a week. And it all went live as well. I built an admin system so they could approve them, and they said, oh, we don't need that, just live. And I've worked in Manchester. If that was in England, it would just be swearing wall to wall. I think we had one with a swear word on. So, look at this guy. This is, you being able to do this kind of stuff and then make this guy happy like this. It's like, that's enough for me, right? So make your own tools. I think if you can code, you don't have to use the software that's provided to you. You can make tools that you can craft yourself. So then you can make a thing that then makes a thing. I like that idea, right? So this is my Twitter activity from 2012, 2007, 2009, 2012. The more spiky it is, the more active I was on Twitter. And you can see that when I first joined Twitter, it was like, I didn't really know what it was. And then now I'm just talking any old rubbish, right? So, but you could actually feel the difference in the data as a 3D physical thing. So I've always liked that idea. And then I got asked to be part of one of a few artists in a book. This a lecturer at Ravensbourne College in London had done a year-long project where all the students collected data around the university, sound data, light data, all that kind of stuff. And I said, you know what, it'd be cool if I could take that data and make some 3D objects and then put that back in the environment. Like the data that we used to create that form, the form then went back into that environment. And so I made these. These aren't renders, these are 3D prints, but they're wood. You can buy material that has got a percentage of wood in it, so you can print wood, kind of. But they're purposefully made to look like, horse chestnuts, like conkers, as we would call them in the UK. And then I varnished them to make them even more. But, as was mentioned before, the 3D printing process actually also was part of the design process. If I rendered these, they weren't the same because the manufacturing process was part of that, and I really like that. And I just like that they look a bit weird, and I like the fact that I put them back in the environment. I imagine people finding them, going, "What's this?" It's some kind of alien object. I thought it was a horse chestnut, but it's kind of. No, that actually represents sound over 1 year, Yeah. So, definitely put things out there that disrupt and get people to ask questions. I always say design is about answers, art is about questions. And these are some renders I did, but we'll move on. I've got enough time, I'm okay. When that purple line gets to there, I'm done. I literally explode. Also with clients, you can go to them and say, look, I've got this idea, rather than wait for a brief. And so I contacted MailChimp. How many people use MailChimp here or know MailChimp or get bombarded by MailChimp? Newsletter company, really big. And I said, look, I think there's something interesting to be done with email and physical objects. How can we fall in love with email again? People hate email. And I kind of hate email, but also I wouldn't have a career without email. Probably like many of us here. Email can deliver amazing things into your inbox all the time. It can deliver rubbish as well every day, but it's also a deliverer of wonderfulness. And we forget that. So I said, look, how about I make 6 physical objects that reinterpret how we can use email? And they said yes, and then I came up with a budget and a proposal, and they left me for like 6 months to just do this thing. I know chimps aren't monkeys, before you say, but it's called 6 Monkeys because I just like the name. So I did this thing. Electric Imp again is great for prototyping and doing these things. I named each one after a chimpanzee that was used in language research. Give things a name when you make stuff, because then you can talk about them. Don't just call it 002. No one cares. No one's ever fallen in love with that. So anyway, Velcro is amazing, but that's another story. Here's one. The idea of an object that you could send email to and it would alter its behavior. Email as an interface. We all use email. You don't have to learn to use email. We all know how to use email. So make that the interface to the thing. There is no app to control it. There's no web form. There's no nothing. It's email. So you can send it a message, and then there's a language, a grammar that you have to know about, but you can make it blink, you can make it go different colors. Why would you do this? Well, there's that service IFTTT, and that you can hook that up to email and get it to do things with other web services. So I gave this to my brother-in-law, and he does like windsurfing and things like that, and he hooked it up to tell him if the wind was like over a certain percentage. He's not a programmer. He knows how to use email. And he wired up like 10 different services to this thing, and he sat it under his TV, and it's still going to this day, by the way. So there was that thing, email as an interface. This was the one people loved. Just ask yourself questions. Why can't you turn email off like a light switch? So I made this prototype. When you create a switch on your wall that can control something, you have control over it, like a light switch. So this is the one that everyone kind of went nuts about on the internet, because they all went, where can I buy this? And I went, nowhere. But again, it's putting these ideas out there that once you have a switch on the wall, it gives you permission to control that thing. It makes it easy. Imagine if you didn't have a switch for your lights and you had to go round unscrewing every bulb. That's kind of how email is now, right? So, and then finally, I wanted to do something weird. And this was a notification system that was kind of embarrassed that it was notifying you. So it was kind of like, oh, you've just had an email from John. And you're like, yeah, but I'm really busy right now. And then it goes, oh, sorry about that. Goes back down. You know, it's nonsensical. It doesn't make any sense. This is using muscle wire. And it's silent as well. It doesn't make any noise whatsoever. It's just a bit weird. And you know, notifications are, by their very nature, in your face. They have to notify you. But you flip it round and go, well, hang on a minute. What if they were a bit more polite? How would, you know, let's ask ourselves those questions. It's okay. No one's going to die. So, yeah. And finally, I strongly believe this. I've got another one of my fabulous drawings coming up. So now this next sketch, I've thought about my process over the years, and I've been working on this next sketch for many years, and it may take a while for you to understand, so I'll leave it on screen for a little while. You might want to take your sketchbooks out and just ponder it. So this is my process. Thanks. So I think this is everyone's process. I don't care if you do agile, whatever that means, scrummy, scrum. I don't know what these things mean. You know, scrummy, scrap. I don't know what it is. I don't know. But messy thing, brief, trying to figure stuff out. You're trying to get to this end thing, this circle, this perfectness. The perfection is a cruel myth that you can never get to, because even when you make something, I just see flaws in my work constantly. And I think that's a good thing to be, because you don't get complacent. So I'll never say my work's great or anything like that. So, but it's something to aim for. So a messy process trying to get to this circular thing. And I think that's pretty much any process, right? So, but everything starts out ugly. Even babies. Right? So, yeah. We all know it's true. You go, oh, your baby's bloody hell. Right, so Twitter came to me and they said, we've got this event in Paris one night. We're getting all the art directors from France in a room. Could you show the creative possibilities of Twitter? And they showed me the venue, and it had all these screens embedded in the wall. I said, well, let's imagine these screens are like windows and we're looking out on them and we're looking through them. Maybe we could, if people tweeted in, it would create, they would create a thing that was based on their tweet and their user profile. And they were like, oh, great. So the first thing you do, you have to create something to criticize. When we make our work, I think that's the first thing you have to do, because otherwise we're talking in the abstract. So I would make, for this, I was like, flocking motion thing, cute, rectangular things looked ugly, but these things swam round, and so I showed that to the agency, and they're like, oh yeah, we see where you're going. These could be tweets, and they generate from tweets. And so I said, right, okay, now I need to generate, what are these shapes that are spinning round? So I was using various algorithms, but didn't like this route. It was, I don't know, I seemed to be making kitchen colanders or something. I don't know what it was. It was weird. But it was fine. It's all part of the process. Everything starts out ugly. We're trying to get somewhere, but it's moving on. But the thing is, these things were swimming round in a square and like a cube, and it was kind of boring. And I thought, hang on, the digital cupboard. So I remembered that I worked out how to wrap lines around a sphere. I thought, well, maybe I could get these things to swim around an invisible sphere, and maybe that would be, as I mentioned before, have more poetry and be more poetic. So I took the maths behind that and applied it to what you've just seen, and I was still on these weird machiney things, but they now started to swim around this sphere, and the maths was a bit weird in places, but it was a lot more poetic for me, and that's the kind of stuff that I wanted to do and create for this piece. So in the end, this is what I did, and you can see I'm still making changes on the night in Paris. This was Open Frameworks, by the way. So that's me still coding things. So people could tweet in, and it would use their tweet as the starting DNA to create these creatures that weren't fish, because that would have been too twee. They were kind of meant to look super digital, but still look friendly almost. My tip, if you ever want to make anything look like a creature, put some eyes on it. That's it. You can have it any shape, put some eyes on it. It's a creature. So anyway, normally I charge at least £1,000 for that advice, but you get it for free. And so all these things were, so we made decisions in the code. So if you were following more people than was following you, you had big eyes because you were voyeuristic. If you were quite prolific on Twitter, you were colourful and cool, and you were interesting. If more people were following you, your body was way more interesting. So what I did, because these were meshes created in real time, I 3D printed some of them and sent them to the client. So this, I don't know who this is. It's male or female, I don't know. But this is the person you want to hang out with, right? This is like, wow, this person's cool, and I don't know what's going on with her face, but I like it. But it's digital and weird, right? Again, I didn't want them to be fish. And these are all 3D printed on proper, full color thing. Powder base, which is why it looks like it is, and again, I like that aesthetic. This is the voyeuristic one. Not all these are different. I've just chosen these, but this is someone who's following more people than he's following them. So they've got big antennas and big eyes. So I thought, well, I've got a system here, right? And I'll put me in it, because I've been on Twitter since 2007. I think I'm a little bit interesting. So hope I can be that person. So I put it in, and I got this, and it was really tiny. So obviously there's a fault in the algorithm somewhere. I do like, however, that I seem to have mascara, which is quite nice. That's it. I'm going to leave you with some words that you can, don't work without a contract unless you're crazy. Document your work. The client wants to make great work with you. Busy is not a badge to be proud of. I don't care how many emails you got when you got back off holiday. Go deep. Explore the scraps on the cutting room floor. Enjoy the silence. And now we're going to have a bit of silence. Thank you very much.